Okay, I think it's recording. Today we're just gonna be doing like an intro to React. It's gonna be a really simple project. Really, it's not gonna be anything like super impressive, like all these moving parts or anything. I just wanted to get people familiar with, again, using the command line and just like how to maybe do a project with the React. Where would they start with it, basically? So let me send you guys the link to the slides in the chat so you guys can follow along with that as well. I didn't make a GitHub for this session since it's like kind of simple code, and I thought it would be easier for me to just have the slides and like talk about it. But if we don't end up finishing, I will send you guys the Medium article that I based the lesson off of, and also like my code repo. Okay, so let's get started. And also keep in mind that I can't really see the chat when I'm like doing all this. So if you have a question, just unmute yourself and ask. So when I get started, I'm gonna go into my working directory. So let me zoom in on this so you guys can see this a little bit better. And I'm just gonna go into my desktop. So if you guys want to open up a terminal or go into VS Code and open up the terminal there, we're just going to be starting off with some commands here to get it all set up. So I've CD'd into desktop or whatever working directory you want to work from. And now we can create our app. If you haven't already installed NPM, I do that. So you can check if you've installed like Node or Yarn by just checking like the version you have. So I have version 14.15. So you guys can check that as well. I'll give you guys like a second to do that. And then if you don't have Node already installed, you can install Node or Yarn. I prefer Yarn, but I think that my MacBook sometimes has some problems with Yarn. I don't know why. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use Node. So I'll just show you guys how you would do that. You do like Node install, and it takes like a few seconds. 1 second. Node. Well, I already have it installed, so I wouldn't be able to do that. But
wait, are you sharing your screen?
Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you for letting me know that I'm not sharing my screen. Okay. Let me start over. Okay. So I'm in my terminal right now. I'm gone into my working directory, into desktop, and we're just getting started with setting up our app, our React app. So what I've done so far is I'm just checking if I have Node installed, and you can check by just doing Node V. And if you don't have it installed, I can send you guys the link to install it at, the commands for it. And it's also in the Wix chat I sent earlier, but I can send it again. So let me just get that link for you guys. Okay. Let me just stop share for a second so I can get the link. And then and yeah, I've also sent it in like the Wix chat a few days ago, so you can check there as well. So here is the link. So you can just like install it from there with through the terminal. And I'm just gonna go ahead and go back to what I was talking about before. Share my screen again. So I already have Node installed, and I'm just gonna get started and create my new React project. So how you would do that is you would say npx create React app, and you can call it anything you want. You can't really use capital letters in your name for the app. I'm just gonna call it like weather app because that's what we're trying to create, or I'll call it a dashboard app. So it takes like a few seconds for it to like really to install. Yes. Hit enter, and then it'll take a few seconds for it to get started. So I'll give you guys like a minute or two to get that working. And if you have any questions about this so far, please let me know. Yeah, it'll take some time. It's kind of annoying, and then sometimes it doesn't end up working, but I think it'll be fine right now. And also for anyone who just came in, I have put the slides in the chat, so you can follow along with that as well. And all I'm doing right now is creating my new React project, and all I said is npx create React app, and I have the name of the app, whatever I want to call it. Okay. Any moment now. And I just also wanted to emphasize that even though what we're building today might be really simple, again, it's a great intro to understanding how all these different like technologies and like frameworks and whatnot like work, which is sometimes like the first obstacle when you're trying to get started in a hackathon project. You really don't know anything, and it's kind of hard to get started with. Okay. So, okay. Still doing it. Anyone have any issues? And okay, I think it should be done in a second. I didn't want to create it before because I wanted to show you guys how we would create the React app. And even though it takes some time, just in case anyone had any trouble with that, I just wanted to show like how it usually works. Okay, so now we can get started. And as I mentioned before, in the prereqs, like when I sent in the chat, in the Wix chat, you should have created an account in Open Weather API. If you haven't already, just take a second to do that right now. But I'm gonna go on to the next step. So if you go to, I'm going to share my whole desktop screen. So if you go to, can you guys see my whole screen?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go to the API page, and get started. And you can see your API key if you go here to your API keys, and that's going to be important for us. 1 second. And you don't, I'm showing you guys my API key, but please don't copy it or take a picture or anything. Your API key is like really important to you yourself. If someone else uses it, you could incur charges. I don't think that would happen here. You'd have to already put your credit card information, but it can happen in other platforms with keys and whatnot. So just a good rule of thumb, don't share your API key. So we want to take note of this. You can copy it right now. And it's going to be really important for us in this project. So I've created my React app. I called it dashboard app, I think. And I'm in here and I'm gonna open up the folder and get started. Dashboard app. So what we're first going to get started with doing is we're going to store this API key in a .environment file. So this like helps you access the API key like throughout the project. I did have trouble with using this properly when I was doing the demo before by myself. But it's generally good practice to understand how you would use a .environment file to store your API keys, because when you do upload to GitHub, or any other platform sharing code, you don't want to expose your key to anybody. So that's why you would use an environment file and you would put it in git ignore so no one else can access it, even when you post your code. So I'm just gonna say touch .env, and that's just gonna create an environment file. And in my environment file, I'm just gonna put, I'm gonna call it my API key, app API key. And I'm just going to copy in my API key. And this way I can access it whenever I need to use it again throughout the project. I already have this. Okay, so all I did is I did touch.environment, and touch creates a new file. Now we can actually get started with the React part of the project. Just wanted to go over some terminology before we do get started. So this, like, you might be familiar with like HTML, and that's a good starting point whenever you're trying to get into React or Node or whatnot. But React is really based on components. It's the building block of it per se. So when you look at a web page, you might see like a search bar, you could see a sidebar, and each of those are different components. And that's basically how we're going to visualize the many different like parts of whatever we're building, like whatever web page. So there's two types of state. There's there's a functional state, and you can be created by writing like a simple JavaScript function. There's also class components, not state, sorry, class components. And these components are aware of the other work that other components are doing, and they work together. And this might sound a little bit vague, but I just wanted to get that terminology out into you guys' mind before we get more into React. So we're going to create our own component, which will import into app.js. So I'm going to, again, use touch, and I'm going to create another JavaScript file, and I'm going to call it fetch. So this is the actual file that we're going to be, I didn't want that there. It should be an SRC. So I'm just going to drag it in. So you should be working in SRC now. All like the files that we'll be editing are there. So let me just open that up. And this is where we're going to be calling the API. This is where like all like the meat of the project is going to be. So first, I'm going to import React. And this is just like your standard import function you have in like Java, if you're familiar with that. And then I'm also going to be using useEffect and useState, which I'll come to later, but we're going to be importing those. And if you see me looking up, I'm just looking up like my code and notes from when I was like practicing this before. So don't mind me doing that. And I'm going to say function fetch. You want to make sure you're calling it the same thing. So when you're importing this, when we import it later into app, we don't have any confusion. Okay. Fetch. So I'm function, and I'm going to bring in my API key. So I can just say constant API key is equal to process.end.react. Whatever I called it before, I called it an app API key. So that's just, again, like how I had imported this stuff. I'm importing the API key from the environment file for me to be able to use it. And then I'm going to establish hooks, which allow us to design or assign each of specific values after we call the API and ultimately display it. So temperature, or the image of like clouds or the sun that's accompanying the temperature, the conditions and different things like that the API could provide us. That's what we're going to be using hooks for. So I'm going to establish these hooks, which are functions that let you go into React state without creating a new class. So feels like is like the feels like temperature. So that's what I'm going to be setting right now. And here we're using useState, which we had imported before. And then I'm going to have so each API has like different ways that you can call it and like access information. And you'll have to look into the documentation of how to do that. But I'm not going to go too much into that today. I just wanted to give you guys this kind of background. And icon ID basically will display like clouds or a sun or whatnot based on like the weather. So I've established these hooks. And I also wanted to elaborate on the hooks later, which I will do. Okay. So any questions so far? Anybody behind? Any questions? Okay, I'm going to move forward then. And then I'm going to establish my styles for basically like how I want the page to look. This isn't going to be any sort of beautiful web page. It's going to be really ugly, honestly, but I just wanted to establish something that centers it properly and has everything looking kind of okay. Okay, so we have that going so far. And now I want to actually get into like the meat of how we would call this API and like the important stuff. So we're going to put the API to use. So you can go to your dashboard on the Open Weather API, and you can look for like different strings you could call. Maybe you don't want to call a city or in a state. Maybe you want to just call a whole country's weather, like in general or whatever. Like there's different options you can have. You can have different kinds of forecasts, 7-day forecast or hourly forecast. You can look into that later, or if you want, you can do that right now. But I'm just gonna drop the link for this API call so that's easier for all of you in the chat. So let me put it here as a comment. Okay, I don't think it's here, but I will include that in a second. So here I'm going to be using the useEffect function, and useEffect functions help us fetch our data and display it. And it lets React know we need to do something after render. Render means to just display something on the page, and it just helps us organize like the flow of our actions per se. And it's a class component. We're also going to be using fetch in useEffect, and that helps us make like requests to the web page. And it's a promise-based API which returns a response object. So promise programming is something that you do a lot in React and JavaScript programming, and it's a type of asynchronous programming, and the function returns a special object back to you, and it represents, it can represent 3 states in the promise, so pending, fulfilled, or rejected, and just some background on how that would work. So useEffect, and this is how you generally set up like an asynchronous function here. And then fetch. I'll take care of, I'm going to have a lot of bracket issues, so I will take care of that at the end. And I'm just going to set up my return. Return is what's going to help us display like the actual like UI of it per se. And I'll get to what this export default stuff is later as well. Okay. So right now I'm setting up the useEffect function. And I don't need that there. So I'm gonna fetch from my link. Open weather. You can copy like the direct link. I can just do that from here. You can copy the link. So if you go to like API, and they have different ways of calling it. So you can go to API doc. And this has like how you would call it, like the different ways of doing it. So I'm just gonna copy this one, because that's virtually what I'm gonna be doing. And I can just paste it in here. It's gonna fetch calls from this place. 1 second, I'll put on my toggle view. Okay, so that's just gonna fetch from this place in the API. And here you can see like city name, state code. So I'm just gonna put that in for now. I'm just gonna put in a city. I'll put in Los Angeles. And I'm putting California. And then the API key, I'm just gonna put in as this. And I actually would rather set it up in a different way that has worked better for me. So I'm just gonna edit this URL a little bit. You can do different kinds of things with this, like whatever is easier for you based on like how you set up your API key with the environment file. And I'm just gonna rewrite this a little bit. You just need to reference my notes. So I have the state, I have the city, I have the state, and then app ID, and then I have my API key, plus this is just part of the URL. So that's how I have called it so far from this API. And then after that, so I'm gonna say .then, I want to put JSON, I want to put it into a JSON format, like whatever results I'm going to get, so that my function can read it, and then it can log the data and also display it easily on the page. So data, and console.log this data. And then remember the hooks functions we set here? So I'm going to call it again and say set feels like. This data that I'm getting from this API call, I'm going to set it to the feels like variable that was associated with the hooks function. And then I have set main. Main. And then I have the icon ID. So what icon ID is, just for some background, is that wherever I am, it'll like display like a cute cloud or like a sun or like wind or whatever has to do with the weather of the location that I'm trying to get it from. Okay, so I've established this actually calling the API right here. So let me fix up these brackets. Honestly, I always just get so confused with this. Okay, sorry about that. And then return. And export default again. So export default is basically like if we want to import it into app.js, which we will have to like render it on our page, because app.js works with index.js, which is basically like the engine of like how the page is rendered. So if I had multiple pages, index.js is where I would go to and import those different pages and have them rendered here with React DOM. So I have to make sure to export fetch or whatever page I'm using. So in here, so far, just to summarize, we've used useEffect and fetch to actually go to the API and get some calls. And I've probably made some mistakes while I'm coding this up, so bear with me. There's going to be a lot of mistakes here. And I do have a working product to show you guys. So even if we don't get through the whole thing, I have something to show you like how it should be working. Okay, so we've put the API to use. And now we've assigned the values to hooks. If you've been following along with the PowerPoint, I'm just going to reference that. And now it's basically it's time for us to display our results. So this is where return comes into play. And before we get into that, I just wanted to talk more about what we did. The fetch method converts the sent data from the API to JSON format, and then it logs it out, like I'd mentioned before. And all of the data that was acquired from fetch will be assigned to the data variable that we have right here. And that's basically how we are setting these different values to what's coming from the API. So we're getting like the feels like temperature and setting it to that. That's what data.main.feelsLike is basically doing. So like you can see, we've provided the data that we've requested using the fetch method. And now we can use the data and assign some of the values in the data to our hooks. So that's what we've done. And since we've assigned the appropriate hooks before itself, it's going to make our job so much easier. It's one of the more simple ways of actually accessing the API and displaying our results. And sorry if I'm going more into the theory here, but I think it's kind of important to understand, because when I was learning React, and I still am learning React, I wouldn't call myself anywhere close to being good at it or really proficient. I kind of just went into tutorials without understanding what the different terminology was and how everything flowed, which I think is important. And yeah, so that's why I was talking about all that stuff before, if it went over your head or got kind of boring. But displaying the hook values to the actual page is really easy. We just have to display the icon through the icon ID hook. So that's what we have over here. And within the function, out of the useEffect method, in the return is where we write like the actual display. So that's what we're going to do now. Okay. So here, I'm gonna first display the temperature, or I'm gonna say feels like, yeah, the feels like temperature, and the actual feels like variable. And then after that, I want to get the image that accompanies like whatever weather is going on at the location that I'm querying the weather for. And that's what I'm doing with this. And icon ID is like the ID of the image that would be displayed. And then conditions. Oh yeah, and then it feels like, of course, we want like the degrees Celsius. And conditions, main, and then that is how we display all our data that we've gotten from the hooks function. So I've displayed the feels like temperature from this. I've gotten the weather, like that's how it get like this image from icon ID, and then like the main weather conditions. So it'll tell you if it's like windy or if there's fog or haze. That's basically what this is addressing. And then I have my export default, which helps me import into app.js. Okay. So for a recap, what we've done so far is we've imported in the API key to be able to actually use it. And we have it in our .environment file. And then we've established these hooks functions. And then we also used a useEffect and fetch function to be able to actually access the API and get our data. And then we're displaying it with return. And here you can go fancy with like the styling and whatnot, but I'm not really doing too much of that right now. And then I'm going to go into app.js, and I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff here or I don't really want any of this. This comes with whenever you like start a React app, that's what comes with it. So I'm just going to call it and I'm going to get the weather. What was it called? No, it was called the fetch. And before I do that, I also need to import it. So it's in the same directory, so I can just say /fetch. And it should import it. So this is I'm probably going to have some errors here, since like talking and coding sometimes doesn't always go well. But if this doesn't load here, I'm going to just show you guys on my other computer because I have it working there. And how you would basically run a React app is you would say npm start, or you could say yarn start, and then it'll take you to a local host. And there you can see this is, oh yeah, I'm not in the right folder. Make sure you're in src. I'm still having problems. Okay. Sometimes this does happen when you install Yarn or all these different packages on top of each other. So I'm gonna try it with Yarn, and if that doesn't work, I'm just gonna show you guys like on my other desktop. Okay, so clearly this is being annoying. I'll show you guys on my other computer how it should be looking right now. But as of now, do you guys have any questions? Anyone, any questions at all? The editor I was using, I was just in VS Code, and I just opened up terminal there. And slides, I can send the slides again. So just give me 1 second. I'm gonna add myself through the other Zoom link and show you guys how it should be looking. I know that was kind of like a lot of information at once. So if anyone has any trouble at all, please feel free to speak up. Okay, 1 second. So I'm I can also send the Medium article, which I base the lesson off of, which can also be helpful for further practice, because there's much more that you can do with what we've done so far. It's just the basics. Sorry about that. I'm checking the chat. So yeah, I sent the slides, and sorry it took a minute for me to join because I had to suddenly update my Zoom right when I wanted to do this. So. Okay. Okay. So. Hey, Raksha, can you make the other of me the host so I can share my screen?
Yeah, I'll do that right now. I didn't realize there were two of you.
Because that's how I can share my screen on this monitor.
Yeah, let me know if it worked.
Okay, yeah, I think it worked now. Okay. So here is the code I have right now. And it's the same drill here. We can just CD into SRC. And it should work with this. Takes a second. I had installed too many packages on top of each other, I think, and that's why I had trouble before. But this is basically how it should be working for you guys right now. Like I said, it's a really, really simple web page, and I just wanted to show you how you could get information from an API and then display it. So we have the feels like temperature, and then we have the icon and the conditions. Like I mentioned, there could be clouds or sun or whatnot. So I'm gonna go back into the code and change it to a different location, and you guys can see how that works. So you just go in here, and I'm gonna put where I live. And it does hot reload. Hot reload means like you don't need to like restart this again. It'll just do it for you. So this is supposed to be a sun. I guess their images aren't too good, and conditions clear, and it is pretty cold. So that's what we have so far. And if you run your code, if you've been following along, it should you should be seeing the same. And just to review, we didn't do anything with index.js. This we just kept as is, as when we had started our React project. And in fetch, we did import our API key. Here I did a bit different. I didn't use the environment file because I was playing around with it. I was kind of experimenting. And then I have the use effect function, fetch function, and then the .then puts it to JSON format so that we can easily log it and display it onto our web page. And this is the actual display that corresponds to it. Just like you'd maybe have like a system print function in any program to see your output. And yeah, that's all we've really done so far today. And it's just been like an introduction to how React works, getting familiar with the command line, which is like really important as well. And yeah, so if you guys have any other questions, that's all I have for today. And I was kind of glad I was able to actually get through it. So let me send you guys the Medium article. Yeah. It was actually a pretty good one. It was like the only, I had tried a lot of different articles and they all have different ways of calling their API and like kind of like deprecated technologies and whatnot that they use. And it was hard to find something that actually worked. So let me send this. And if you want to access the recorded video, it should be on the YouTube for Hackers, and it'll be uploaded, I think, by tonight. Anyone else have any other questions? Also, like, you can feel free to message me, and if you want to know more about how to learn React. I know this might have been kind of messy because I feel like coding and talking for me is like that, but yeah. So thank you guys for all coming today, and I'm gonna stay if you guys have any questions. Thank you.